Good afternoon and welcome to the Joy Show. I'm Barbara Schreiner Trudell and I am your host. I am also the spiritual director for the Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake. And I am delighted that you have joined us today. The Joy Show is really about each person who finds their pathway to their authentic self, that sacred self. And today we have a remarkable guest who I find absolutely fascinating. The journey, oh my goodness, this is something. You are going to love today's show. So my guest today is Reverend Elzia Sekou, and he's the senior minister at CSL Denver. Previously served as a special focus and young adult minister at Mile High Church. He is former Islamic imam, and professionally, he serves as the lead application engineer at LTCI Partners, focusing on IT strategy, process improvements, and system transformation. Rev Z is a former chair of the Lakewood, Colorado Cultural Diversity and Human Relations Commission, as well as a former college professor. He is a certified Myers-Briggs practitioner and holds a bachelor's in business management from Florida A&M University, a master's in management information systems from the City College of New York, and a master's in transformative leadership from Holmes Institute. Elzia resides in Lakewood, Colorado. Rev Z, how are you today?
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
Thanks for having me.
is there anything you have not done?
I, I'm sure there is, and I know there is, but I have been blessed on this path to do a whole lot of stuff. And I was just telling someone the other day, I could not have planned this if I had tried for a billion years. The way my life has turned corners and take me to places that
Oh,
that that are just amazing.
well, I'm curious about one thing in particular, and that is your pathway to becoming a New Thought minister, a CSL minister. Because you've been an imam, you said you were raised with Christianity. Okay, let's talk. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about this journey.
So, that part has been a very interesting journey. My mother died when I was 6. And I was raised in the South, Southern Baptist. You don't question the word of God and all of that. And so when my mother died, I was asking questions like any 6-year-old would do.
Absolutely.
And I got a bunch of platitudes. Oh, your mom is in heaven, and all of that. And
Yeah.
then as I got older, start asking them questions. You don't question the word of God. And I'm thinking, when I was 6, the first thought I had was, yeah, all that heaven stuff sounds good, but I'd rather my mom be here than in heaven. That means absolutely nothing to me.
Exactly.
And so because of that, I went on this journey of exploration and questioning and seeking. And so I've been on the seeking journey for a very long time. And so grew up in Christianity, was in the choir and, did all the things that you do, vocational Bible school. And then at 18, my father died.
Mm.
So at 18, I was in I just finished my freshman year of college, and I was, full-fledged adult at that point. So all of my friends were writing home to their parents for, care packages and all of that. I had a mortgage and a car payment and, so
Wow.
that again, that shifted my mindset into another way of looking. And so I started this spiritual search because at that point I was pretty depleted,
Yeah.
and I found Islam. And it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. It answered questions that I'd been asking and no one answered,
Yeah.
uh, and so I embarked on that path. And I still today call myself an Islamic religious scientist, um, and- because the tenets and teachings of Islam for me are so palatable and so uh, revolutionary, if you will,
Hmm.
um, that I still love and adhere to those today. Still fast and everything. So, uh, but as I became older and spent a lot of time interacting with Muslims from all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
Like with anything, when you get a shiny new toy, it's good, and then after a while, it ain't so good. So you start questioning that toy, and so it became very conflictual. And I guess one of the points that really flipped me to another seeking mode was I was supposed to be at the World Trade Center on the morning at the time that the plane hit rather. And the reason I wasn't is because I had an interview for a job that eventually brought me here to Lakewood, Colorado. And so I wound up, I lived by Mile High Church, and my job was I had to pass Mile High Church twice a day going to work.
That's quite the church.
And it had, at that time they didn't have the new sanctuary. They had this looked like an igloo, and I was and they would have Wednesday Night Live, and I for the life of me, I always read it as Saturday Night Live, and I kept saying to myself, "What church is having Saturday Night Live?" That was just my mind playing Jedi tricks on me, I guess. But eventually, we tried to go to a mosque. The mosque was a long way away, like an hour to get to the mosque, and I said that's not sustainable. And so we were looking for a spiritual home. And so my wife was going to go. And I said, well, you go. I'm not going. I'll stay home. I'll keep the kids. I'm not going to a church. And and at the last minute, I said, okay, we'll all go. So we went, took the kids, dropped them off. As many storytellers of their entree, if you will, into Science of Mind, we sat on the last row on the corner by the door. So if it wasn't working, we could just go grab the kids and get out.
Quick escape.
Quick escape. But wrapping it up, it was the teachings there. I was sitting on pins and needles, and then after the service, I said, "This wasn't that bad. What wasn't like a traditional church service." Exactly. So we came back the next Sunday.
Yeah.
And same thing. And I was like, well, because they were saying, Ernest Holmes did not set up a religion. He set up a educational institute. His thought was, we have too many religions now, and I'm setting up an organization to be a golden thread or to highlight that golden thread. And that resonated with me.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I said, well, this is just like a Sufi order in Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that point, I was all in. And so I kept, that was in 2001. In 2002, I started taking classes, me and my wife, and we finished the regular classes, went straight to practitioner, and I went straight to ministerial. I just went straight through.
And that's awesome. It's interesting how we find our way to Science of Mind, because it does sort of, like for me, I was raised without religion. My father was agnostic, my mother was Christian, but she lost. Dad was the boss.
Yes.
So we just didn't, I went to church a couple of times with friends or whatever and thought, I don't know about this. And then I went to Sunday school. There was a bus who would come and pick us up for a full gospel church and take us to Sunday school. And it's like they're showing us pictures of some guy hanging on a cross. And I'm like, oh, man, this is – I'm not liking this very much. This isn't great. But when I had my spiritual epiphany, I was 27 years old, and it was in a Nazarene church. Of all places. And it was a moment of walking in because, if I go there, my mother-in-law might start liking me. And so I thought I can endure an hour of whatever. Endure was my word going in. And when I came out, it was like somebody flipped a switch and turned a light on. It was brand spanking new. I was like, holy crap, God is love? What?
Where did they write that?
Yeah, but it was like I had to leave that church. I stayed there about a year and a half, but I couldn't get that. I talked to pastor and he'd go, yeah, the rabbi's going to hell. I'm going, that doesn't make sense to me. What about good people who never heard of Jesus? No, only us. We're the only ones who can be, saved because we believe in Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord. And I'm like, oh my God, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the experience I had. And then I found CSL. Yay.
And it's great. I mean, we look at those, we look at teachings that tell children who are formulating pictures of the world and ways of being in the world that there's only one way of doing things, and that if someone doesn't do it this way, they're going to be punished.
Yeah.
and 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 we get up now, and even though those thoughts change as they have experiences,
Yeah.
those dichotomies are already planted in their minds, and it just shifts to something else, and we wonder why we have all the separation and all the divisive issues and things we have, because that stuff has been supplanted early.
Very, very early. I was talking to a friend of mine who is originally from Cheryl. Actually, she's going to be doing a show with me starting in September on the New Thought Network. But she's from South Africa, and like she said, you didn't have to. She's a white woman raised in a black country
Mm-hmm.
that was run by white people.
Right.
And she said, just the way the news stories came out, you didn't even have to think about it. It was implanted
Yeah.
in your head, white is right.
Yeah.
And, trying to break that down and change it, it's like, and I mean, it's different here than it is in South Africa, but it's still that idea that we plant ideas in our children's heads,
Mm-hmm.
and we I'm not sure what we're thinking, when
We're
we do
not.
this. We're not thinking, yeah, we're completely unconscious. Because, I'm part of an organization that works with people living with HIV, and we support them in many ways, like with food bank and medications and finances and all kinds of stuff we do. But what's interesting is that it's a very diverse group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Part of them are white, but the majority of them are indigenous or from India or black or whatever. They're just
Mm-hmm.
not your white people. And so we're coming together trying to figure out how do we dismantle colonialism.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's our job starting next month. So I'm really curious.
Yeah, I will be saying a prayer to you and for you, because that story of South Africa. I was just having a conversation with a friend not too long ago,
Yeah,
and talking about the psychosis of the American psyche, where especially doing safe coming out of slavery. Now,
yeah,
some of it got passed on by just cultural behavior, but imagine growing up in like the 50s and the 60s, where you had maids and people, blacks, working in your home, especially
yeah,
for kids, who did everything for that kid. They washed their clothes, they fed them, they helped them with homework until their parents came home and the help went home.
yeah.
But you couldn't speak to them if you saw them on the street.
I know.
So imagine the dichotomy in a kid's mind
Yeah,
where Miss Mary does everything for me. I actually love Miss Mary. Miss
yeah,
Mary takes more time with me than my mother does, right? When I
exactly.
fall down and scrape my knee riding my bike, it's Miss Mary who
Yeah,
fixes my knee or
yeah.
fixes my bike. But if I see her on the street, I can't even say hi.
Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. It it baffles me beyond um and I know, like, I was raised in a white city with white family with all white stuff. I never met a person of color until I was in my 20s.
Wow.
Talk about a white city, other than indigenous people, right?
Yeah.
Because and
Yeah.
those were the ones that if I was going to show my racist views, that's where it would be, because my dad would go, "Oh, look at those drunk Indians," and
Mm-hmm.
that was, and I never even realized that was
Yeah.
there until I was traveling through Northern Ontario a few years back and went through a reservation, and that idea popped into my head when I went into a gas station on the reserve, and I was mortified that I would have such a thought. So I had to go into the washroom and get my head straight, and then come out and talk to this beautiful man who was standing behind the counter, and just get to know him a little bit,
Yeah.
just to share a new idea because when that thought went through my mind, I went, oh my gosh, I have judgment about people being racist. But the fact is, I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mortifying.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm going to go out and harm people or whatever, but there's within me that natural, because of the way I was raised, it's
Yeah.
like, but I don't have to live with that forever. I
Yeah.
can begin to change it.
It's amazing the culturalization that happened. Like I lived in Australia for a couple of years,
Okay. Yeah.
and everyone would always ask me, were they racist towards you? Well, how was the race relations? Uh, and I said there may have been, but I didn't see it. They looked at me more as an American.
Yeah.
So the stuff that I got was because I was American primarily. Now there may have been some other undertones, but
You should have
that's
put a
not
Canadian flag on your jacket.
exactly. But their prejudice issues were towards the Aborigines.
The Aboriginals. Yeah. It's the
And
same
so
thing up here. That's our
it's a
biggest.
culture.
Yeah.
Somebody, that whole false idea of somebody is superior to somebody else, so
So,
that the superior, whoever considers themselves to be superior, is really trying to uh, hide or deal with their own inadequacies.
yeah, their insecurities. Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually a great way of putting it, Rev Z, because I think, when I look at the way we separate, even within the New Thought movement,
Mm-hmm.
as we talk oneness like nobody talks oneness, and we practice separation like nobody practices separation. And
Yes.
my New Thought church is better than your New Thought church because
And this whole idea, I was at a meeting, and a question was asked about competition. Did one center, how did you see yourself in relationship to another center in terms of competition? I'm like, why
yeah,
are we even asking that question? Uh I'm not I mean, I was and this may be some of my Christian upbringing and Islamic upbringing, is that if I'm representing God, the divine intelligence of the universe,
yeah,
uh there's a challenge here of compensation, not in a lack of prosperity kind of a way, but in terms of how do I reconcile that? It's a reconciliation issue. It's an accounting issue. How do I reconcile my books? In terms of I'm doing God's work, and if I believe in God and God's work in the Word, my compensation will come without doubt.
absolutely, absolutely.
And I don't need to put any conditions on it as
No,
to, well, if I don't have these conditions met, then I can't give you this word. Well, okay, I'm gonna check that word now, because if you're telling me you coming with the goods, but I can't get them unless I do exactly like you say,
yeah.
I'm
See,
questioning.
that's the thing that has baffled me for a long time. We don't have another CSL church up here, but we do have a number of unity churches.
Mm-hmm.
And so I collaborate with them and with UFBL. We have one UFBL church. So my sense is that, if I'm going to do a games night or something, we're doing it online. Let's all get together and do it. So we've got people from Windsor and Ottawa and
Nice.
Kitchener and Toronto all coming together to play. It's great fun. The joy of being online is we don't have to. And Cheryl, who's going to be doing Spirit Cafe with me starting in September, she is the spiritual, I don't know what you want to call her. She runs the Kitchener Unity Church. And so her and I collaborate on all kinds of things. Like some of her people come take my classes, some of my people will go join her spirit group or whatever. Like there's an energy exchange that we do. We'll advertise each other's stuff that's
Yes.
going on. And we both serve on the Unity Canada board. So I'm a Unity minister as well as a CSL minister. I'm
Oh,
a member
nice.
of both.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Because you just made me think about, when I was growing up, uh our church had like I don't know what they called it officially, but I called it like sister brother relationships with other churches. And so
Hmm.
on certain Sundays, on certain months, everybody from our church would go over to their church and join the
Of
service. And
course.
then next time they would come and join ours. And then sometime you'd have 3, 4 churches get together and do a program with music and food, and then they'd split the money together. I mean, it was like there may have been competition, but as a kid, I didn't see it. I saw it as this big collaborative thing of how to get people to understand and trust and follow God. Now,
Exactly.
of course, I
Exactly.
know as a kid, I didn't see all the politics.
No, and the politics, I'm sure, were there. And, for sure, the politics are still around. I'm choosing to ignore them because, frankly, it has nothing to do with me. And I'm going to continue to view the world from that bridge.
Yes.
Even when it comes to, I did a funeral a while ago for a friend of mine who was a member of my congregation, but was Jewish. And so he had a Jewish funeral, but I was there to do treatment. My daughter was there to sing for him, and being able to collaborate with other faiths. I mean, we're all loving people into their wholeness.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I view it. Is if I love you enough, you'll love you enough that you'll be able to love me back, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing that, then I'm doing the good work,
Yeah. That's
and there's no separation in that.
and that's the joy, right?
That's joy.
The joy is to be as I articulated to myself, so that I'm saying, sane and anchored, is that if we're able to communicate and, as you said, be authentic, if even if it's quirky, right? Because we
Special.
only need to look at a rainforest or some real integrated ecosystem, as we were talking about before we got on the show.
Yeah.
You start taking one or two little elements out of the minerals in the rainforest, or one of the plants, or one of the animals, you have just begun the degradation of that whole ecosystem, because everything is connected. Everything is doing their joyful dance
Yeah.
to maybe, take one aspect away, but add another aspect to
Add
keep the whole
another
thing going. And so we as humans have so much to learn from just observing nature.
Well, and that was one of the things in one of the big national parks in the US where they had taken the wolves out.
Yes.
And
Up in Montana, they did it.
yeah,
Yellowstone.
completely decimated everything because now the deer and whatever could just eat everything to the bone and nothing was left. They brought in a handful of wolves and the ecosystem was restored in short order.
Yeah.
Like we take things out because we think we should. We haven't got a clue.
No,
We need to
no,
just stop.
no. It's like, I love this. I refer to this phrase often as my mantra, by Alan Watts. Alan Watts, in summary, said, we have to look at life in oscillation. We have to continue to oscillate between the micro,
And the
the
macro.
macro, and the normal vision.
Yeah.
Because if we get stuck in the macro, in the micro, we might get a lot of details done, but they may be done in the wrong way or the wrong direction. If I'm at macro, then I got great vision, but ain't nothing getting done.
Nothing
And then if I'm at the normal, I need the normal view to try to gauge between the two, so we're making some progress.
because
And
we need to
and that's how we have to live life every day.
yeah.
And when and life, I think, demands it. And if we don't, life gives us a tap on the shoulder. Oh, you living in this great vision? Okay, where's that manifesting? Because you ain't done nothing to make it happen. Or you in all these details, you building this fabulous house, but it's to the wrong specs.
You
What you gonna do
forgot
with
the
that?
foundation.
You got no restroom in that house. What you gonna do?
I could live without a kitchen, but definitely not a restroom. I love that. And that's such a great way of looking at kind of how we try to micromanage the world. And
Mm-hmm.
we really need to look at it from a different vantage point where we're seeing our place in it, but also noticing the bigger. So we move from me to the collective we,
Yeah.
and begin to live from that, where we can start to create some kind of harmony and balance, recognizing that all life has value,
Yeah.
or it wouldn't be here.
Wouldn't be here. And you know, I this topic is heavy on my mind, if you will. I'm in a book club and we're reading Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural.
Oh, I don't know that.
Uh,
Hmm.
and there's a chapter in there that speaks to this concept um, that we have to move through this progression of somebody to nobody to everybody.
Yeah.
And basically he's saying that in that somebody stage, and he's, you know, being someone, doing something, it's self-centric, right? It's all about self when we're doing the somebody thing.
Mhm.
uh, but pretty soon, if we're pretty astute, we'll realize that I can't do it all by myself. And
Yeah.
part of that is as we were saying earlier, is tinged upon my in inconsistencies or inadequacies or lack of self-esteem. And so I make it all about me to try to hide. But once we get beyond that, we go to nobody, where I don't I'm confident in myself and my connection with however you want to term it. I don't need anything
Yeah.
outside of me. And then from there he goes, and I'm summarizing poorly. Then he says, you move to everything. That once you get that understanding of your place in the scheme of things, you can use and be everything, and you can be everybody. I can be a carpenter, I could be an electrician, I could be a singer, I could be a dancer, just to use that as part of it. So that progression, when we move through it and we get to see that all things are possible. That's what it means when it says all things are possible to him that believes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, on that note, let's take a short break. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Joy Show with Rev B and Rev Z, and we are having a really good conversation. So we'll be right back. Well, welcome back. I'm Barbara Schreiner Trudell, and I am here with Rev Z today, and we're having a wonderful conversation about spirituality and life. And man, it's really going all over the place. I love
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
I
And,
love
you know,
it.
I am so happy to be here and have this kind of conversation because life is a 360-degree experience.
Yes, it is.
And because it's a circle or a spiral, depending on your level of 2 dimension or 3 dimension, uh, there are no corners to get stuck in. So
Oh,
we go around the circle and it all wraps in together.
yeah.
And you know, from my understanding, that's when you really begin to make some progress on this thing called life, because you begin to see that in a circle everything is connected. There are no places where you can get stuck.
And
Now you
that's
may stop at a spot.
Yes, you can.
But
Well, that's the thing, when we come to really acknowledge our interconnectedness with all things,
yes.
that's the journey that we're on is finding our place within this incredible system that
Mm-hmm.
is intelligent, that is powerful and positive and productive, and where do I find myself in that
Yes.
grand scheme of things, and can I acknowledge I am one with all of it?
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at Putin and passing a judgment, well, I'm one with my brother Putin, whether I like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so acknowledging that, and then looking at where do I focus my attention,
Mm-hmm.
what is my intention? And so I find myself, not to do spiritual bypass, but to look at someone like that and recognize this is a call for love. And I don't know exactly how to make that happen.
Yeah.
But when I think of him, I think of, just sort of wrapping this individual in a vibration of love, knowing that at some point in time, an awakening may occur or not, and it's
Right.
not my choice or my place. And same with all the wars that are going on around the world, the racial unrest in both our countries, because it's
Mm-hmm.
going north of the border as well. And when we look at all of that, all of it is coming from that fear base.
Yeah.
That somehow somebody's going to take something from me. Somehow my life isn't safe because of X, Y, or Z, right? So,
Yeah.
well, not Rev Z, because he's
Yeah.
he's got all the right answers. He's a good guy.
I try very hard. I drop a few of them, but I try real hard.
Yeah, me too.
Because when you were talking about Putin and you made that statement, it was very insightful to me because I started going there. I started going to the place like where inside of myself is a little Putin
Absolutely.
that's being dogmatic and unhumane to myself or to my wife or to my
Bet.
office or whatever.
Mm.
Because we all a reflection, right? It says we all a reflection, and then when we think about in the first chapter, first paragraph of Science of Mind textbook, I love it where Ernest says, "I look forward to the day where science and spirituality walk hand in hand."
Yeah.
And when we look at a couple of the things that happened uh, in the past week in science in terms of that mirror and reflection, they
Mhm.
just found in the CERN at the CERN over in Switzerland, they found 3 new subatomic particles that they'd never seen before. Go
Wow.
look up new subatomic particles found in CERN. It was just either beginning of this week or the end of last week. And
Okay.
then they just started revealing all the pictures from that James Webb telescope
Yeah,
that
I
are
saw
looking
that.
out 13 rather billion years ago. And so now we see this reflexive as this reflexive universe, if you will, that reflects
Yep.
what's there reflected in us, and what's in us is reflected there. And as we continue to peel this onion,
Yeah.
we get closer and closer to the core. For those who need empirical proof, can't get the word out, because those of us with faith and insight, we can make that inference. Comes from the law of correspondence. I understand, as above, so below. So once I understand that correspondence,
Yeah.
it might be nice to see the hard evidence, but I don't necessarily need it because I understand the law.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, it's interesting when you look at the idea of quantum physics and how, I was reading the original Science Mind text the other day. I teach a class on Wednesday nights using that through the summer.
Mm,
We're doing drop-in classes. And I love it so much because it's so great. But him talking about the ether
yes.
and that substance, right, which is really the quantum field. And what's interesting is he had no way of knowing that in the early 1900s because they hadn't yet broke things down into that subatomic level.
Exactly.
And today, I mean, I just look and go, well, science just proves everything we teach.
Yes. And it went the scientists of that time, they got so fed up with people talking about this ether, they did everything they could to poo-poo it, to discredit it. So if you look up ethers in the dictionary right now on the web, it says it's some fictional kind of whatever. But then in the same voice, they'll talk about the quantum field or dark matter, or the same
Yeah,
thing.
sounds like the same thing to me. But that's the journey, as we move along and as we find kind of uh, our sense of self in the
Mm-hmm.
mix of all of it, that's when we become truly empowered. And that's why I do this show. I want people's stories to be heard.
Yeah.
I want different opinions to be heard. The Spirit Cafe that Cheryl and I are going to start doing in September is courageous conversations.
Mm.
We'll have to get you on that show.
Yes. Yes.
And again, it's going to be about, let's just sit down and it's not that we have any answers, but let's have these courageous conversations where we talk about things that are different than what we know personally or what we've experienced personally, and just allow ourselves to discover something new.
Right.
Talk about death because nobody wants to. Let's talk about racism because
Mm-hmm.
nobody really wants to. It's
Yeah.
like we're treading on thin ice here. Well, let's tread on it.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're going to break through sometimes. I pastored 2 Black churches for the last 11 years. You want to know, there was more than once from the pulpit that something came out of here that probably should not have. Right? But I didn't know, right?
Yeah.
One time I did. As soon as it came out, I was like, how do I pull this back?
Come on back.
And I just continued my talk. And at the end of it, a woman came up to me and said, do you really think that was appropriate for this congregation? I said, absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she went, oh, and her and I are like this, right? But I didn't need to defend myself.
Right.
I just needed to acknowledge that was inappropriate. That does harm. And I didn't mean it to, but it did. So, I think sometimes allowing ourselves to have those difficult conversations to honor that we don't know.
And because your congregation had built up a trust in you, and they got to know you by having courageous conversations previous to that on whatever. And as my father would say, if you really want to know somebody, you eat with them, sleep with them, and travel with them. And in a short period of time, you will know them. And so they knew you, and they knew when you said that it was out of character, but it wasn't part of your character.
Exactly.
So they could come to you, be frank, be open. You receive it in the exact tone and intent that it was given. Let's move on.
Well, and that's what happens. With this PWA group that I'm part of, there are 2 white people on the board. Everyone else is Black, Latina, and Indigenous. And then the executive director is white, and our fundraising person is white. Everybody else is, racialized people.
Mm-hmm.
Women kind of are part of that mix, but we don't have it like everybody else. So we're working, like we came together yesterday as 4 white people going, okay, what's ours to do? Right. Because it's not up to them to change the system we put in place or our ancestors put in place.
Right.
It's up to us to find some solutions. And so we're not clear what they are, but we are absolutely up for doing the work of dismantling this racism and this white supremacy. Yeah. And we don't know how to do that, but we're stepping on that train going, you know what, whatever it takes, I'm gonna do my piece.
I applaud that because, we all have our idiosyncrasies.
Of course.
And so there are some issues in the African-American community or people of African descent. There are prejudices and ideas about some encounter we may have had that we project on other white people that not even them. Yeah. And so the whole thing is that we all have to do our work.
Yeah, we do.
And to do that, we have to have those courageous conversations with others and with ourselves.
Yeah, we got to have them. I was listening to an interview with the author of Me and White Supremacy,
Mm-hmm.
and she was really clear. She said, she basically said, if you're white, you're racist, whether you know it or not.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you're a mean person going out
Right.
hurting people, but it
Right.
means at some level you just don't know what you don't know, and you're going to step on toes. And then I was in a workshop by a woman here in Toronto called Kika Ojo Thompson, and she did a workshop called Daring to Do. And in there, I was really moved by her work, which was fantastic, and calling us to step in and do what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
But I had her come to a unity convention that we had, and it was a room of 90 white people. And she turned around, she goes, "Well, only white people can be racist." And I'm sitting there waiting for the Zoom calls to drop, but they didn't. They
Wow.
didn't. People stayed on the call. And she said, the reason I say that is because white people are the only ones who benefit from racism.
Right.
And I thought, wow,
Yeah.
like I had not put that together.
And the other side of that coin is power. To establish a system of racism, someone has to have power to put that in place.
Yes, yes,
And most people that are suffering from those conditions don't have the power to put
they
it in
do
place.
not. Well, it's one of the things that happened in the meetings that we were having with one of the organizations I'm part of, is that I stepped up and interrupted a, a members meeting and basically said, "You cannot do it like this. This is not how an AGM is run." And afterwards, everybody's going, "Oh my gosh, that was so brave." And I was going, "No, it wasn't. I mean, I know you couldn't have done it,
Right.
and you probably wouldn't even have been allowed to, like,
Right.
because you would have been shut down by the white chairperson of the board."
Mm-hmm.
But he couldn't do that to me.
Yeah.
And I just called him on his stuff, right? And that's what I can do when the time presents itself.
And that's what we that's a perfect example of we all have a part to play.
Yeah.
And it also, again, to me in my mind, speaks to the diversity. There's out of that a myriad of people, ideas, thoughts that were there. Your diverse ability to speak, to say it, da da da, was what's needed now to take that whole environment to another level.
And that's what happened. We ended up with a whole new board, and we've got a powerful group of people who are working in collaboration. We're creating wonderful friendships. We're learning about each other. And one of the things that I mentioned to the executive director was it would be really nice if we did what's called a human library.
Mm.
And in a human library, one person spends 30 minutes and tells their story.
Mm.
There's no conversation. They get listened to for that half an hour. They get to tell their story. And I thought, what a powerful way to come to understand each other a little bit is to do that type of deep work. Here's my journey, because we all have a story. And
Yeah,
some of us have had lots of harm in our lives, and some of us have had a more easy road, but we all have interesting things that have occurred.
I love that. I love that because as soon as you started, there's an African proverb that says each one teach one.
Yes.
And that's what needs to take place, because even if two people live in the same, two identical twins live in the same house, same parents, we've done enough studies to know that there's a lot in common, but there's a whole heck of a lot that's not in common, which means
It's
each
true.
one of them bring a unique thing to the table that no one else sees like them.
Hmm.
And when they can tell their story uninterrupted,
Yeah.
unjudgmental, and
Yeah.
and just feeling free to see, here is what I have to offer. If you connect anywhere in this, fine. If you don't, that's okay. There's somebody that's going to connect.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I love about it. I've been thinking about bringing it to Robert, going, is there a way we could do that on here?
Yeah.
Because I think, as we start to have those understanding of each other's path, And, my path is not the same as your path. I'm not
Right.
nearly as educated as you are. You've got all these,
No.
these masters and bachelors, and I'm a minister. Um,
That, that's all we need, really.
but you know what? I've got this. I've got
Yes.
this heart for this journey. But what's interesting is that when we come to look at each other's journey, we learn things that we had no idea about. My friend from South Africa, she was studying science of mind in her teens in South Africa and met Og Mandino.
Wow.
Og Mandino is one of my favorite authors. I've
Yep.
read, I think, everything he ever wrote.
Yep.
And she got to meet him. And I'm thinking, Science of Mind in South Africa, like 35 years ago? Like, I didn't know that.
Right. Right. And when we look at our lives in the rear view mirror,
Yeah.
and we see where we are now, it's very easy to see how either through my own guises or through the universe I was pushed or guided or led or dropped bread, however people want to term it so they feel good about it, uh, that I am right where I should be right now.
Yeah.
and
I'm
and
sometimes surprised I'm alive today, actually, when I think back to my younger years. Somebody was looking up for me.
as they often say in the Black community, thank God I had a praying grandmother and grandmother, because I sure wasn't praying. And I would have been in some bad spots. But that's the beauty, when it's so, like, I consider myself to be an amateur genealogist.
Okay, yeah.
And so I'm going back through the records and census and talking to folk and everything. And it's interesting how I'm finding things about my grandparents and uncles and great grandparents and the ideas that they put forth that they were never ever to accomplish, but I was. And I look now about things that I wanted to do and the way I wanted to show up in the world, which I couldn't do, but my kids are. And so when we create this line of thought, when we talk about, in this teaching, that thought has power, words have power.
Yes.
And they may, and there's this thing in system dynamics that says cause and effect are not always closely related.
Mm-hmm.
So I put forth a cause with some words and ideas that I wanted for myself, and the effect happened 2 generations away with my grandkids, maybe, or 1 generation away with my kids.
Yes. Yeah.
And when we understand that, then we know that we need to constantly have good thoughts. Because there's a thing in the Bible about the general saying the sins of the father, right? I can see that now. If the father puts out a bad idea, we don't know. It's energy. It's in the field. We don't know when it's going to coalesce and come back down.
Exactly, but it will.
It will.
It will. Yeah, I think that's a great little comment. The sins of the father, because I don't think we fully understand that sometimes. It's like, what, my dad did something, so we're taking it literal rather than going, wait a minute, this is talking about a historical. In the universal consciousness, everything is known that has ever occurred, and so all of it can still impact me today.
Yeah, it's like a rain cloud. It's like rain. The vapors are being pulled up now from water, lakes and oceans and sprinklers watering the grass. It goes up in small vapor. You can't see it.
That's right.
But then it coalesces together and comes back down as rain. And it's the same thing with thoughts. Our individual thoughts go up. I believe it's the same way. And so now they come back down in thought clouds, and we have, different ideas and thoughts and creativities.
Yeah.
Anchored in togetherness and comes down.
Yeah, and it's sort of when we think about all of this stuff coming together, it's like the multidimensional universe that we're a part of. That so many things are happening that we have no idea about, and yet it's all part of this universal subjective mind, or however we want to name it. There's something going on that's deeper than what we will ever touch, but it
Yes,
has power.
yes, yes. I,
And it,
you know, we as we were saying before we started, we live in such an amazing and fantastical and mystical and mysterious place that we shouldn't have time to be fighting and disagreeing and all. There's so much stuff we don't know. We should just be setting up little groups. Look, somebody go figure out why the wisdom and beauty of the bees or the ants or the birds or whatever, because there are things that they do that we can't even begin to imagine.
Well, I mean, think about, I mean, bees shouldn't be able to fly.
Right.
Like aerodynamically, they're not created in a way that should be allowed to fly. And ants can carry like how many times their weight?
Exactly. Exactly.
So it's like there's so much we don't know.
But we
That's why I
think
like
we
people.
say we the crown of creation though.
Yeah, we like that, don't we? I look at when we went into lockdown, because Toronto was in lockdown for quite a long time. But one of the things that we noticed right away was how wildlife flourished instantly. Like it
Mm-hmm.
did not take a long time. Take us out of the picture for 3 months and watch what happens.
Yes.
The trees and the grass and like everything flourished because humankind was removed from the equation.
Yeah.
We were locked in our house, and
Yeah.
guess what? The world around us did well. When I
You
think
know,
about climate change, I think we're the ones who are going to die. The climate will restore itself once
yes.
we're out of the picture.
Yes. And I mean, you could on just that statement you said, that's a PhD thesis right there. Just looking at the dynamics between how things flourish and things appear that hadn't for years when you took one element
One out.
one out and not a divisive one, not a cooperative one. It'd been different if we were cooperating. We might have had another kind of effect, but that we're not always cooperative with the whole.
We're not. We're not cooperative with each other. We're not cooperative with the universe, and we're definitely not cooperative with nature because it's
Uh,
too hot, it's too cold, there's too many bugs. It's like we got all kinds of stories, right? My eldest daughter is a wildlife photographer, and she does some amazing, amazing photography. It's next level. And, she'll talk about, how we live. Like one of the things out back of her home, she lives in a residential area, but out back of it, there's a large green space.
mm-hmm.
And there's a big, big uh, land mass that's off to the side that's just all wildlife and stuff, so she can get lots of photos there. But in this space behind her home, that's where the coyotes live. And the coyotes are great because they're going to eat all the rats. Well, Calgary doesn't have rats, that's their story. I'm not sure it's true, but that's their story. But there's like the mice and all the stuff that would come in and infiltrate your home, they're going to look after them. But she was trying to educate people about living in harmony with coyotes because there's nothing wrong with them.
Right.
And they're not going to come and do anything to you unless you get in their space and between them and their cubs, or you let your dog run around and,
Yes.
stuff's going to happen.
Yes.
So she was trying to educate people about this. And it was interesting, the pushback. And what people want to do is just go in and kill them, get rid of them. They're an annoyance to me. Well, they have a purpose. And it's how do we educate each other? One of my favorite sayings is every single person, in fact, every single thing is born unique and special, like everything else.
You tell that story, and there, one of the things I studied was system dynamics,
Hmm.
and in for anybody out there that's and this led to management theories. Jay Forrester was the guy who at I think Jay was at Harvard, either Harvard or MIT,
Yeah.
somewhere up there in that Boston area, and he developed the guided missile
Mm.
based on feedback systems, and so from that he left that and went into system dynamics and management and leadership theories, and he had this thing that it's very easy to predict a two element system. If I got foxes and rabbits, when rabbits increase, foxes increase. As foxes increase, rabbits decrease. And so now we get this thing.
Yeah.
Now, if I throw in a predator of the fox, you can kind of model that system.
Yeah.
But then you throw in something like a parasite that you don't know whether it's going to affect the foxes or the rabbits or the mountain lion.
Yeah.
That's very soon gets out of control of you trying to manage it in your head.
Yeah.
And so we have to begin to learn to trust and observe and feel into things so that we make good decisions, because we're not always going to have everything we need to make the best decision right in front of us.
So does that mean we're the parasite?
Ooh. We're
Oh,
definitely parasite-ish, if nothing else.
parasite-ish. That's because we do tend to think that we can go in and create something perfect. And so we will destroy all manner of things because we think we might have a solution, which is great because we're thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, like you say, you have to take time to actually observe.
Right.
And that's what I loved about the beginning of COVID when we locked everybody in and I watched nature flourish.
Yeah.
That was a really loud indicator to me of the impact that we human beings have on our environment.
You know, and it's like, I don't know which Native American tribe this is attributed to, or even if it's, I believe it is, that says when they make decisions with 7 generations in mind.
Yes.
So they're trying to definitely get outside the box that they know everything and this, that, and the other, so that they can try to take into account things that they can't even imagine right now.
Exactly.
So that thing has a better chance of succeeding and not being destructive, because I've thought outside the box and I've taken myself and put myself in a smaller position as to this grand position, as if I'm the Wizard of Oz and I can wave a wand and make it all happen.
And look at the Wizard of Oz, right? That was the grand illusion. So
Yes.
that sort of speaks to all of us.
Yes.
I love the indigenous ways of life because when we allow that, it's a holistic system.
Yes.
That would work very well.
Yep.
And we are at the end of our time, if you can believe it. Oh my gosh. I could talk to you all day.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Oh my goodness, this has been so beautiful.
Yes.
Revzi, you are remarkable, and I am so grateful to have spent this time with you. And I'll look forward to having you on our Spirit Cafe when that starts.
Yes.
I think it starts on September the 7th, something like that.
I'll put it on my calendar.
We'll get you in, because I think the conversations that we want to have are courageous conversations, and it doesn't mean people are going to agree with us, and they don't need to, and we don't have all the answers. We just want to have conversations and learn and discover and be teachable. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a ball. I can't believe the time has just flown by, and if there's anything I can do at any time, just let me know.
Awesome. Well, I was thinking of a new Mercedes.
We got to work on that one.
I'm just messing with you. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being here with us on The Joy Show. I am truly delighted. Next week, we have a fitness expert who will help us to get pumped and in shape or whatever. And so I invite you to come on back next week at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And have a blessed week, a great weekend, and know that you are loved just as you are. Bye for now.